Hello, America. Good evening, good morning, wherever you may be. It's late night in Seattle. I'm Evan Grant, your Rangers insider for the Dallas Morning News, dallasnews.com, with Torby. This week in Rangers baseball, y'all. Before we get into this week's uplifting and positive news, of course, just a reminder, thank you for watching these videos as I point at you. What a jerk I am. Thanks for watching the videos. Thanks for liking the videos. Thank you for subscribing to the YouTube channel. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Please mash that like button, thumbs up button. Leave me a comment with a question if you want. It's been really fun to do these and to get some feedback from y'all. And now, into the news. I don't know why the jazz hands represent the news, but I'm a little bit, it's Seattle. It's late at night. You walk the streets here and you kind of get a secondhand high. My friend from Root Sports Network, Jen Muller, baked a rum cake and brought it to the press box tonight. So I may have a little bit of a buzz from that. And I just watched the Rangers lose their second consecutive one-run loss to the Mariners, their fifth one-run loss to Seattle overall this year, their 23rd one-run loss. They are 5-23 in one-run games. Just an astounding record. Quite frankly, it made me look it up. They're on pace to have the worst winning percentage in one-run games in at least in the 162 game era, dating back to 1961. They have a 179 win percentage. And I guess, as I wrote a couple weeks ago, maybe this is payback for 2016 when, and I did look this up too, the Rangers had the best one-run winning percentage in Major League history. I believe they were 36-11 that year, or 34-11. Team luck they were. This year, not so much. I think we'll get into a little bit of this in just a minute, but we can break down the one-run losses any way you want. There have been nights like Monday night when there were a number of egregious mental errors. There have been nights like Tuesday night when the Rangers fought back, took a lead, and just couldn't execute once they had the lead in the ninth inning. There have been games in which there were defensive lapses. There have been games in which there were base running lapses. There have been games in which they didn't get big hits with runners in scoring position. And there have been games in which the bullpen blew the lead. But I'm here to tell you, even as the Rangers fall to 10 games below 500 this year for their first time, when you step back, this is me stepping back, and look at the big picture, these Rangers are who they told you they would be before this year ever started. They are an improved team offensively. Their issue has been that they're short in the starting rotation, and they have an unproven bullpen that simply has not been up to the task. And so when you get to all of this and you evaluate this club, this is who this club probably telegraphed that they would be. There shouldn't be a whole lot of surprises here. And if you want to actually go down the ledger, and on my little notebook, I kind of made a ledger sheet here of assets versus liabilities, or positives versus negatives, if you will. I don't want to be accused of being a homer here, even though I look like Homer. I still think that the assets, or the things that have been determined on a positive side for the future, outweigh the negatives. You start in the starting rotation. John Gray, in particular, since May 1, has been everything that the Rangers expected that he would be when they signed him to a 4-year contract. His slider has been outstanding. He's used it more and more, and he's gotten better as the season has gone on. Martin Perez goes without saying. The Rangers have him on a 1-year deal right now. It's an absolute bargain at $4 million. As the trade deadline approaches, the Rangers have to consider whether or not they need to go and extend Martin Perez for 3 or 4 years, or whether there's somebody out there. And I really don't think that the takers will be overwhelming to try and take a pitcher with not exciting, sexy stuff. Martin's stuff is good. He knows how to pitch, but he's not going to blow anybody away with 95, 96 on a regular basis. Martin has been everything that the Rangers asked for and more. When this team talks about trying to establish a championship culture, he's been in every part of the locker room, talking with guys, willing to give of himself. A rock star, to quote Chris Woodward, in every corner of the clubhouse. And he's pitched great. So those are the two things the Rangers really wanted to establish this year, and they've gotten that from Martin Perez and more. You go down the list, even though Josh Smith has gotten into something of a rut here and he's struggled for the last 10 days or so, I think both he and Ezekiel Duran have really shown the Rangers really promising results on the Joey Gallo trade. I don't know that I would have expected either one of them to be in the major leagues right now, and here they are playing on a pretty regular basis. Smith has had some trouble getting on base of late, and looks a little bit overmatched by pitching in the last 10 days. Duran, since his return to the big leagues, looks very much like a guy who can impact the game in a number of ways. Chris Woodward said he just seems to show up in ways that he can impact the game. You go a little bit further down the list. At what point in time do you start to say that Leody Taveras has been the single biggest positive development for this team this year? He's been back up in the big leagues about 6 weeks now. He's hitting .340 on base 38% of the time. He's a prototypical leadoff guy that, in terms of his profile, he's performing that way. At some point in time, you have to think the Rangers are going to say, let's put that back at the top of the lineup and see how it plays. But everything that the Rangers have promised that Leody Taveras would be, he's shown that in the last 6 weeks. Completely different player than he was in 20 and 21 when he just wasn't ready for the big leagues. He's hitting the ball with authority. His at-bats are good. He's been a very good player. You go a little bit further down the list, Brock Burke has been an outstanding find in the bullpen after moving over from the starting rotation. I think there's been some promise to Taylor Hearn as a reliever once you moved him out of the bullpen, or once you moved him out of the rotation. Jonah Heim has played catcher basically at an all-star level this year. After a slow start, both Marcus Semien and Corey Seager seem to have settled in and are performing at the levels the Rangers would have expected. Now, their overall numbers aren't the stellar numbers that the Rangers would love to see, but I think that's impacted by how slow a start both of them got off to in April and May. But I think they are in the process of putting together solid seasons. Corey Seager's on pace for a 35 to 40 home run season. This is a guy who had a career high of 26 previously. And then you look at the after effects of the draft, and you look at the top of the minor league system in terms of upside for pitching prospects. And when you've got Jack Leiter, Kumar Rocker, Brock Porter, and Owen White, that's 4 really top end of a rotation type prospects. Cole Winn, you'd like to think is in there, though I'll get into him in just a minute. But my point is that the Rangers have they have a promising future for starting pitching, more than I think you can say in a long, long time. That's a pretty long ledger, or pretty long list on the ledger on the positive side. You go over to the negative side or the liability side, and probably the biggest single disappointment this year has been the lack of progress from young starters. And I put Dane Dunning, Taylor Hearn, Glenn Otto, Spencer Howard all in that mix, along with Wynn, along with AJ Alexy. The guys that the Rangers thought would take a step forward in the back half of the rotation have not. The guys the Rangers thought would be ready to step into the rotation from the minor leagues have not. That has been, if there's an impediment, a significant impediment to the Rangers opening of a contention window in 2023, it's that right now I'm not so sure that they have the wherewithal, the internal resources to put together a contending rotation in 2023. I think the last 5 days of the trading deadline here, they've got to look seriously at acquiring a pitcher, even if that means giving up somebody from that pool of Duran, Smith, Justin Foscue, where they've got depth at the minor league level. They've got to get a controllable pitcher in here who can go into the rotation for next year. And they may still have to go out and either acquire another one via free agency or a trade after this season. There's still a lot of work to do on the starting pitching side. And that's with two guys who have performed at near all-star level. Martin Perez has been an all-star. John Gray has been as good as anybody since May 1. So despite all of that, the Rangers still have a lot of issues in the starting rotation. Again, the bullpen is the other part of that. It's good to see Jonathan Hernandez back, and that's promising. Jose Leclerc, since he has returned from his Tommy John and latissimus or teres major surgery in the back of his. I'm not patting myself on the shoulder, though this is good video. But I'm not patting myself. That's where his injury was, in the back of his right shoulder in 2020. He certainly looks like a guy who's been out for 2 years. He's been rusty. He's been ineffective. And the Rangers just haven't had anybody step up and grab the closer's role, whether that's been Joe Barlow. Leclerc hasn't demonstrated that he's ready to go back into it. Brett Martin struggled when he has been put into the ninth inning. So there are some questions about the bullpen long term. Again, I think that bullpens are so fickle that from year to year, the performance varies widely. You get a couple guys who step forward, all of a sudden your bullpen performs way above the scale. You get a guy hurt or two, and it impacts everybody along the way. So that's something that the Rangers are going to have to continue to work on. Something they're going to have to look into firming up for 2023. And then the other part, and I think this was decided long ago, really, that Nick Solak and Willie Calhoun didn't have significant roles going forward on this club. Both were considered hitters. They didn't hit enough. Solak is back with the big league team for now. Had a nice bunt after entering the game as a pinch hitter on Tuesday night, but there's not going to be much call for a bunting pinch hitter in the big leagues. And so it appears the Rangers have all but moved on from those two guys. Certainly they traded Calhoun. But they've moved on a little bit from thinking that Solak would be a viable piece of their future. I think there's still some question up in the air about how exactly Adolis Garcia fits in long term. I think he could be a potential trade piece. He's very controllable. I mentioned in a column the other day that Tampa Bay might be in the market for a guy like Garcia. Again, he's come out of since the All-Star break very hot. Last year, after being a surprise All-Star, he really struggled. If he performs in the second half this year like he did in the first half last year, if he is refreshed and in that regard puts together an OPS in the 250, 325, 475 range, that's an 800 OPS in that slash line. That's big league regular everyday player. Certainly with his level of defense, that's valuable. I think the question is still out also on Nathaniel Lowe. Offensively, again, his at bats are really good. I think he's been fairly consistent for most of the season at the plate, but when you look at his numbers, they're middle of the road among first basemen offensively, and he struggled defensively a lot. Struggled really badly there. His reactions at first base just often seem a little bit slow, and that showed up that showed up in a lot of ways, particularly in close games. Again, Lowe is going to have to be a first baseman who OPS is at 800 or above to really have value to a championship club because of the shortcomings on defense. So while the number of things on my list that are on the asset side of the ledger far outnumber the things that are on the liability side of the ledger, there's still significant questions that the Rangers have to answer. And it still is a big part of why they approach the 100 game mark of the season further below 500 than they've been all year. But I do think as the Rangers reach the trade deadline, as they reach a point where they've got to figure out what they do moving forward, as they continue to look for a controllable starting pitcher, potentially peeling off, maybe some of the relievers that are the veterans. Matt Moore certainly would have something of a market. There might be a team in the market for Garrett Richards. Again, these are not going to be trades that significantly move the needle in terms of prospect, but you're always trying to gather as much talent as you possibly can. And I don't think that would take away from the core of this team moving forward. As they assess the deadline and as they get down to it, I think the Rangers just need to keep in perspective that by and large, this team is about what they expected it would be this year. They've had some unfortunate luck. I think you have to say when you're 5-23, there's just some bad luck involved in that. Are they a great 500 team? No, but should they be closer to, let's just say, 10-15? They've got 5 more wins in run games. They're right, they're 5-1. They're 5 under 500. And it's looking like a much more significant improvement over the 2021 season than it does now. So those are things I think the Rangers need to take into the front office, and the ownership needs to take in perspective as they approach the trade deadline, where they are versus where they want to be, and who they realistically are. They are what I thought they would be coming into this season. I don't think they're far off from what the management thought they probably would be. You can get carried away when you flirt with 500 for a while, that maybe you should be a little bit better. But this is what this team is. It's got some flaws. It's improved from last year. It's hit something of a rut. It needs to dig itself out. But it needs to take into consideration its assets versus its liabilities as it forms an idea for 2023. Because let's face facts, the other part of all of this is that 10 games below 500 and falling further and further from the idea that there would be any kind of contention for a wild card spot, even with the extra wild card. The focus is going to become on putting together a 2023 roster. I think that means you're going to see Leody Taveras at some point in time hitting leadoff. You have to look at that. I think at some point in time, the Rangers are going to have to look at a couple of other things, but they also want to finish strong, and they need to finish strong. This is going to be year 6 of a losing record if they don't play 10 games over 500 the rest of the way. It's a place this organization has never been. 6 consecutive losing seasons. You run the risk of completely disenfranchising your fan base. So there's a lot to consider. There's a lot to put into place. I think the Rangers are taking all of that under advisement. I'm trying to find a way to get out of this video, and I can't, because I am not a TV person. You know that by looking at my face. Anyway, it's going to be on to Anaheim for the weekend to face a team that's been a major disappointment in the Angels. I still don't know how a team with Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout can be as far below 500 as they are, but there they are. And then the signing deadline for draft choices on Monday, the trading deadline on Tuesday. And looking forward to the rest of the future pretty much after that. But I will be here with you after the trade deadline to wrap all that up. Whatever surprises, if Juan Soto just happens to fall into the Rangers' lap somehow, I'll be here to report on it. If they make any trades like sending away Martin Perez, I'll report on it. But now, friends, is the time when we say goodbye here on Sprockets. And I will see you next week. So long, everybody. This is good video.